Welcome into the show, guys. We are all smiles. I didn't expect us to be all smiles the way this game was going, but the Rockets get a big win, their first win against an above 500 team this year, 122-115 in Milwaukee. I'm here with Ben DuBose, Paulo Alves. You guys know both of those guys on Twitter. You can see their handles as well here. Guys, I'm really kind of floored by the way the Rockets came back. There's a ton to talk about in this game, but I'll start with you, Ben. What was your reaction as the Rockets come back to win 122-115 in Milwaukee?
Yeah, before we talk about the specific plays at the end of the game, because I thought they were surgical when it mattered, which was a refreshing change from what we saw, especially the first week of the year when they struggled in the half court against the Thunder and against the Pistons. I want to talk a little bit macro, because if the Rockets get this version of Kevin Durant, 31 points on 11 of 15 shooting, and after having 8 turnovers on Friday, tonight he had 7 assists to just 3 turnovers. If you get this version of Kevin Durant, and it's not like we're asking for a ton. I mean, the last road trip, the games he had in Toronto and Boston were amazing. If you get this version of KD, and that's for the game as a whole, he was even better down the stretch in the last 5 minutes, which we'll get to. It's amazing how so many of the concerns just fade away, at least in terms of their importance. Like, I'm not going to say this is a perfect Rockets team. Like, you can certainly nitpick the point guard issues. How good are they defensively if they're running Reed Sheppard or double big and choosing to play more zone? We can get into all of that. But if you have this version of Kevin Durant, and last week for the most part you didn't, you're probably going to be fine, because when you have 2 all-stars, and Amen Thompson is someone who's not there yet, but he has the capability of playing at that level. We saw it in Memphis. Then a lot of your other concerns aren't going to be quite as important. And I just think that's so important to hit home off the top. And last week, the first 2 games, KD shot like 30%. And even though they were both wins, that one against Dallas was a lot uglier than you would have liked. The shooting ticked back up in San Antonio, but he had the 8 turnovers. Tonight, he put it all together. It was like he was on that last road trip. And when you get that version of Kevin Durant, the y'all know who I am version, then this Rockets team, it's amazing how much bigger the buffer is. And Paulo, I'll kick it to you on this. So let's talk about clutch Kevin Durant. Obviously, that's what he's known for. There's this stat going back to the start of the decade. I don't have it in front of me right now, but basically, since the calendar turned to the 2020s, of all the Tier 1 NBA stars, KD has the best record when games are decided by 5 points or less, in large part because of what we saw tonight. I also think his ability to shoot at all 3 levels is particularly important late in games, because defenses have to account for every inch on the floor against him. So, Paulo, who would you prefer in the clutch? The Kevin Durant we saw tonight, or the Davis Mills that we see when the Texans are largely playing for draft positioning in the fourth quarter?
Listen, that's a really tough choice, because it basically comes down to sample size, right? Do you want the guy who's 100% win rate when you want to lose the game, or do you want the guy who's an all-time great and has a lot of games where he's been clutch, but has also lost some? I mean, I think it's a very tough call. That being said, and then Davis Mills props aside, I'm still revising my take of the Texans should be taking or not. I think it's not just because he's so good in the clutch. It's because this team defensively is, I think at this point we can just say it, is not as good as it was last year. And at certain points they cannot get stops. Like there were huge stretches of the game where the Bucks are basically automatic 2 points, especially with Giannis there, in which at that point it's not really just how good he is closing, is that he's keeping us in game by how consistent he's been scoring. Meanwhile, we're trying to figure out those defensive issues, right? And so I think with KD, you obviously coming into the season thought, okay, this is the guy you're going to slot into the Jalen Green role. He's going to be your closer, right? But I do think it cannot be understated what he's been doing, keeping us in games, making shots that only he can make in situations. Sometimes it breaks apart a sequence where we've turned over the ball a lot. Sometimes it's just one of those, great offensive teams go back and forth where you can't stop, you can't be stopped and you can't stop anybody. And he has been our go-to guy in those situations. Obviously, Sengun has been great as well. Don't want to take anything away from him, and in the sense that he's making that offense stick when we don't have a point guard. But yeah, KD is a great closer, but we cannot forget how well he's played to keep us in games going late into fourth quarters.
Yeah, I mean, Durant was just unbelievable. Can't say enough good things about him in this game. 11 of 15 from the field, as you pointed out. Guys, 31 points overall, but 7 assists. And we can talk about that as well for Kevin Durant after having 8 turnovers in the San Antonio game. That was really good to see because he is your closer, your best offensive player, the guy you want to have the ball in his hands at the very end to get the big shot. You want that possibility that when the double comes, he can find the right guy, not turn it over. Today was really good in that regard. Did have a few turnovers. It's really interesting. I think Ime Udoka talked about this after the game. It was like the night and day difference from the first half to the second half. The Rockets were down 61-50 the first half. Matter of fact, Sengun and KD were 7 of 7 combined from the field, and you look up and the score was tied. This is early in the game, of course. And I was a little bit concerned because, as Paulo was talking about, this is not the same defense. Defensively, they have slipped some. The zone has definitely had some problems that have been exposed that they're probably going to tighten up and work on. It was better in the second half. They played better in the second half. I thought KD was the story, not taking anything away from Sengun. We'll talk about Sengun too because he had a couple of big baskets late. One that was just unbelievably impressive that will play as well here. But relative to expectations, this is the Reed Sheppard game. I mean, he's had 2 good games in a row. He, as far as offensively, quite efficient. He looks more comfortable today. 16 points, 6 of 10 from the field, 4 of 6 from 3. Had 4 steals. And I'll hand it to you guys. I'll play the clips here. The Reed Sheppard, this game in a really good team, 6-3, the Milwaukee Bucks. He was phenomenal. I mean, I thought his play today was like, wow. Now, we've talked about little bits and pieces of the vision, but this is actually it kind of playing out. The defensive issues will be there. We're getting better on those, but offensively, this guy's got a lot to him.
Yeah, and he's shooting basically 50% for the year on threes now. Like, whatever concerns there were about his shooting, and that was always small sample size theater, consider how little he played last year, there's a reason why going into the draft, this guy was billed as a generational shooting prospect. So we're seeing the shooting start to translate. What's most encouraging are plays like this one, the instinctive plays defensively, the vision to push it ahead. Like, you can't coach this stuff. And then this sequence right here. So he hits a shot to pull them within 5. And then what happens on the ensuing trip? KD said after the game that he felt like this sparked the Rockets.
Yes.
The steal there, and then the 3 from the corner to push it to 2.
No hesitation.
Yeah. And to tie back into the general theme, which is the defense, at least at this point, without Dorian Finney-Smith, is not what it was a year ago. This game was frustrating for a lot of reasons, but most notably, it felt like every time for a while that the Rockets would get it down to 3 or 4 points, the Bucks would push it right back up to 9, 10, or 11. And I think the reason for that, the Rockets forced a lot of turnovers throughout the game. But then when the Bucks really felt threatened and they, took the possession more seriously and they were more crisp and decisive in their decision making, they were usually able to get a good shot because the Rockets aren't as good defensively. And we saw that down the stretch in San Antonio. Well, what happened in the fourth quarter, the Rockets, Reed sparked them. I think KD is absolutely right in saying that. Like, those weren't traditional stops. Those were Reed going out of his way to make some home run plays defensively, which he is capable of making. Like, for all the critiques, he can make those types of plays, and they have a ton of value. He also had a big block defensively down the stretch of that game. And then what we saw down the stretch, once first KD and then Alperen Sengun made those plays in the half court late in the game, it felt like the Rockets gave the Bucks a haymaker, and then the game pressure is what forced the Bucks to get a little bit tight, I thought. We saw Giannis miss some free throws late. Like, on paper, the Rockets, between 2 All-Stars and Kevin Durant and Alperen Sengun, and first it was KD, then he drew a little bit of attention, and then Alpi took advantage of that gravity and made a couple of huge plays himself. KD was also a great passer in that stretch, had the dime to Jabari for the 3 that put them ahead, I think, for the first time since the first quarter. When you are able to deliver that type of haymaker, and I know they hadn't early in the year, but there's a ton of small sample size theater to it. We're just 3 weeks into the season. Even if your defense isn't great for the game as a whole, then that type of game pressure is going to force the other team to get a little bit tight. And I thought that's what happened down the stretch of that game. So I think, it starts with Reed making some home run plays on both ends of the court to keep the Rockets competitive. And then down the stretch, I think what basically happened KD and Sengun were so lights out efficient offensively that it forced Giannis and the Bucks to get a little bit tight, and ultimately that was enough to swing the game.
Yeah, and regarding Reed, right? At a certain point, like you're talking about a 6'2" guard, and we've seen 6'2" guards historically. You're typically like Reed's. I don't think Reed's ever going to be like a great on-ball defense. First guy um, defending their primary ball handler. But he might not ever be a positive defender, even if he's average. The fact that he's such a good playmaker, getting steals and blocks, obviously that's not all defense is about. But maybe you can make up for some of your deficiencies when it comes to playing straight up defense. When you get those steals and you are able to not only get the steals, but then have the crisp decision making that is shown tonight in transition, making sure that you make the right play and you actually convert those turnovers into points, which is something that Rockets at times struggled with. But then beyond that, right? I think ultimately what is going to make or break this team. Like I think they've shown offensively they're going to be great. And I saw someone was asking, do you trust Reed to play in a series against OKC? Right. I think eventually, as this team gels more and more together, I think it's taken longer on defense. But I do think that we have the personnel to be a better defensive team than we have been thus far. Right. The same guys that were there last year are still there, besides Dylan Brooks, who we think will be replaced in large part by Dorian Finney-Smith. And if there's anything I can say with 100% certainty is that I trust Ime Udoka to eventually be able to get the most out of his personnel defensively. We saw it in Boston, a team that when they went to the finals and played against the Warriors, they flipped the switch defensively in the middle of the season because Ime was trying stuff out, and eventually he landed on what the best strategy was to get the most defensively out of the players that he was getting at the time. And at that time, he was playing, I think, Al Horford and Robert Williams at the same time, right? We have the personnel for this team to be great defensively. It might be, different lineups, might be less double big, it might be less zone, it might be overcommitting a little bit more on threes and having guys chase guys around. It might be perhaps not having a man Thompson be the focal point of the offense and hoping he can become the disruptor defensively that he was last season. There's a lot of ways to go about it. There's a lot of tools in Ime's tool bag here. So I think ultimately that will be the way for us to ascend from what right now is a team that hangs with anybody but can lose to anybody because of not being able to blow people out other than the really poor teams, to that type of contender. And I think once we figure that out, I think Sheppard will be a part of that solution. If he keeps playing like he is right now offensively, that it will make up for the defensive struggles that he has had when it comes to playing straight up defense.
Well, and let me point out the question that was just on the screen, Dave, because I would love to have your input on this. Somebody asked about potentially starting Reed over Okogie. And I texted you about this during the game. Now, to Amen Thompson's credit, he was better in the second half. But the first half, he struggled to finish. He had 3 turnovers. We know the point guard issues that are there. There's also the question of if you're asking Amen to handle the ball more, does that take away from the juice he has defensively? And it's not like the idea of starting Reed is reactionary based on just a couple of good games this weekend against good opponents. While it is good to see Reed step up under the bright lights, these were 2 statement games against the Spurs and the Bucks. It goes deeper than that for the Rockets. Like we know in the preseason, the Rockets thought about starting Reed Sheppard. Right. It had been told to me. I think it had been told to you, Dave. Like behind the scenes, this was something that they strongly considered. They also looked at the double big. Obviously, they ended up going with or have gone with Josh Okogie for the last couple of weeks. But if you think you need a point guard, you need more ball handling, maybe you need to save more juice for men, is there a point, I don't think we're there yet, but is there a point where you start Reed Sheppard? Like, I think it's a fair critique, especially because, like, I think do the Rockets have a point guard, I guess that narrative is especially important, is in the first 43 minutes of a game. Like, the last 5 minutes, we saw the way this game ended. Like, they have closers between Kevin Durant and Alperen Sengun. It slows in the half court, and it just comes down to who's going to be able to make the play. And the Rockets had one more of those guys at the top tier than the Bucks did tonight. I think
sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just setting you up for it by saying the first 43 minutes, that's where, the live ball turnovers can put you in a deficit. If a man gets too tired defensively, that can add up. It's more of a first 43 minutes question. And so that's where I'm not saying I'd flip it right now, but I do think it's a fair question.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. And I think you kind of answered it. I think we're not there right now, but that's where ideally want it to be, right? I mean, I think we all knew that when they took him, that this was the guy they hoped would take the torch from Fred down the line, not right away. And they wanted to give him that every opportunity to do that. It could be also a little bit matchup dependent. I mean, Milwaukee's a really good team, so I'm not taking anything away from it. They're not the physicality team that we've seen in some of these other ones. And that's going to be a little bit tougher for Reed. Again, I'm not taking anything away from this incredible showing he had tonight. Just saying that it's just going to take a little bit of time. But I think ultimately he'll be given every opportunity to take that starting job because that's what they want for him. I don't know if you think anything differently on that, Paulo.
Yeah, I think I'm with you guys as well. I think eventually he will take over that, especially because of what it does defensively for the team in order to let him and Thompson be more active and being in more positions to make those disruptive plays. But what I will add as well is that while I do think that eventually it will happen, and I'm not sure if now is the time to do it, I do think that we also got to view this early season stretch as a little bit of a springboard to what's going to happen later in the season. I think if you can remain a competitive upper tier playoff team, be within 1-2 games of those, 2, 3, probably 2, 3, 4 seeds, I'm okay giving these reps to a man and Reed as well. This goes for both of them because I do think it will pay off later in the season and later in their careers, right? You got to take the fact that Fred VanVleet is out also as an opportunity, and a man's getting these reps, right? And sometimes it looks rough. Sometimes he goes off for 30, and most of the time when he does, it's a little bit of that off-ball stuff, right? But at the same time, I think we'll see this will pay dividends down the line, and it might hurt a little bit right now. But once again, I think we've talked about this in the first version of this show I was on. This team is not optimized right now, right? And the fact that they are not optimized right now will make it so the weak links right now will be better later on in the season because they got these reps earlier. And it's not. I'm not even talking about this as a 2-3 year plan like we were back when we were tanking. I'm talking about for this season right now. These guys being in these positions will pay off within this season. This is not a long-term investment. It's an investment for this season as well. Like these 20-15 games early on in the season will pay off in a playoff situation where maybe guys are out with more fouls. Maybe some guys got hurt, and we need these guys to step up. The fact that they're getting these reps now, even though it might cost us a few games, I think will pay off later on.
Yeah, I'm really impressed with Reed last few games. It's not just a one-off fluke. Like I said, it's been building the last few games as his offense. Yeah, the last game defensively, there were some problems down the stretch, no question, against San Antonio. I want to talk about just the contrast again real quick in halves, and then we'll talk. I'm sure some people are like, hey, get to KD and Sengun a little bit more and Jabari with the big shot. And we're going to play those here in just a second. But it was amazing in the first half. I'm watching this game, taking notes, and I'm like, the Rockets are becoming, at least I'm talking about in the first half when I'm watching this, a bad caricature of what people were saying they were. And it was like they were just turning it over like crazy. They had 11 in the first half. Sengun and Amen at this point in time at half had more turnovers than assists each. And they gave up 9 of 18 from 3-point range. And there was a play, I didn't pull the clip, but they broke that zone down where there was just a simple dunk down low, or maybe I can't remember, it was Myles Turner, like a simple, wide open shot underneath the basket. And I'm like, man, they are picking the zone apart. They made significant adjustments to the point where down the stretch, KD hit that incredible turnaround, got fouled. We'll play these clips. KD then found Jabari for 3 off the elbow. KD makes another incredible mid-range jumper, and then Sengun puts the nail in the coffin, had a little flip shot over Giannis, and then just this incredible, star level play by Sengun at the end where Giannis is chasing him all over. He gets around Giannis, and then he, kind of collides into Myles Turner, spins, scores, gets fouled, does the Sengun flex and the whole thing. And Rockets pull this game off. They were big offensively down the stretch. Like I said, we'll play these highlights, but it really was, to me, such a difference from the first half to the second.
Yeah, and Reed had a lot to do with that. He made it run a lot more smoothly, I thought. In the first half, to your comments on it looking like a caricature at times, I would agree with you. I would point out that it's always going to look a little bit different when you start the group that the Rockets had, and especially when they go double big with the men at the point. But I also think, look, with the men, what needs to happen is that you offset the occasional turnovers and, maybe moving a little bit too quickly, with him being lethal going downhill, finishing near the rim, pressuring the rim and kicking it out. And what we've seen the last few games, the combination of athleticism, power, and length, he hasn't finished as well as the Rockets need him to, with the exception of the Memphis game when he was incredible. But Dallas, we talked about how after that block by Daniel Gafford early in the third quarter, he wasn't the same. San Antonio, he went 4 of 12, and it felt like ever since Wemby got him early in that game on a block, he was a little tentative going inside. And tonight, the Bucks don't have a huge shot blocker, but they have a lot of size and length between Giannis and Myles Turner, and it felt like he was pulling up from 5-6 feet instead of actually attacking the rim. And it would help if he actually made those 5 or 6 footers. He missed some good looks tonight, but I also thought, in a perfect world, a man is 6'7", super powerful. He should go to the rim. And it looked like, again, he was a little bit tentative. So I think that's something to watch. Like, I think it's pretty clear. The Rockets have a high floor all the time because of Kevin Durant and Alperen Sengun, as long as they are healthy. The ceiling is about Amen Thompson and to a lesser extent Reed Sheppard. And when they have the version of Amen that they had in Memphis, that's when they're lethal. They didn't quite have it the last 2 games, although Amen, to his credit, was better in the second half. He did make a tough bucket in the half court in the fourth quarter tonight. So hopefully we see that more. He's still just 22 years old, year 3. He's still learning. But I think it's never going to look traditional with Amen, but if he just finishes, so much of the concerns with the ball handling and the turnovers, like, it's not going to go away, but it won't be quite as important as it looks the last couple of games, when not only is he giving the ball away and the offense looks clunky at times, but he's also not finishing the way he should with his size and athleticism. And then late in the game, to spin it forward, one of the fun subplots for me to see Alperen Sengun take over down the stretch of that game. Guys, how fun do you think it was for him to do that against Giannis after that ridiculous Eurobasket storyline? Like, I'm sorry. Do you guys remember the aftermath of the Greece-Turkey game? I thought his comments on Giannis were so benign. It started with, I believe, Giannis is a great player, or Giannis is an amazing player, but he's not a great passer. That's totally reasonable. Like, that was a completely reasonable critique. Quite frankly, I hate, as a media member, I hate whenever we pile on athletes for giving quotes that aren't just boilerplate, because then we incentivize them to say nothing. No, it was a revealing quote of how Turkey wanted to defend Greece in that game. I believe it was either the quarterfinal or the semifinal, an elimination game that that Turkey and Sengun won against Greece and Giannis. And it turned into this whole like international incident, basically. And it was a completely benign quote, I thought. Like, Giannis is a great player, but amongst all the great elements of his game, I would say passing is not quite as great as all the other elements. That's what Sengun was saying. And somehow, it started with, wasn't Greece coached by Spanoulis, Rockets legend, Dave? Isn't that the Greece coach?
I did not know that, if he is. I did not know he's the coach of Greece.
I think he is. I'm sure the chat will correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's Rockets legend coaching him from back in the day. But the point is, I thought that was so blown out of proportion. Like, come on, it was an innocent critique. And in the first game since then, I know they made up on social media in large part because the fan bases were going back and forth at each other, and Giannis and Sengun were just like, hey, this is ridiculous. We need to, lower the temperature. But for Sengun to do that in Milwaukee, including that last one, which was just an and one mixtape move, going the full length of the floor against Giannis, that had to feel so good for him. Of all the teams and players for him to do that against, I don't know if he'll say it post game, but privately, I bet you that it feels a little bit better for him that he did that against Giannis and the Bucks.
Yeah, and being fair, it's not like Giannis had a poor game himself. Obviously, down in the clutch, he missed those 2 free throws, which was, really killer. But Giannis was having a nice game himself. So this was a little bit of those, type of legacy games. Like, I'm here, I'm going one-on-one with you. Obviously, KD helped as well. But I also think that something that I found, not necessarily funny, but among those plays, there were points where I thought Sengun had a chance to kick out for a 3. And it felt like it was very intentional of him to take it all the way himself and to, that's a star mentality. And we saw, and I don't think Sengun's ever been someone who's scared of the moment, but perhaps at a certain point, the right play would have been to kick out for a 3, but it's a high variance shot, right? And he took it upon himself, took it to the rim, got that end one, got that little floater as well. This to say that I do think that there was something with Sengun mentally to close this game that it wasn't just business as usual. Let me try to let me work as a computer and make the right play every time. Sometimes the right play when you're a star is to take it to yourself, because even the best 3-point shooters are in the clutch. Talking about a small sample, right? The best 3-point shooters are what, 40%. 40% of the three versus I'm the star. I'm gonna take my two and I'm gonna make it 60% of the time. Rather go for the two because it's a lot lower variance. So yeah, I did think that Sengun was in with a different mentality this game.
And Dave, I looked it
Yeah.
up. Vasilis Spanoulis, Rockets legend, is the Greece coach.
I did
And
not
so
know that.
he is the one who blew it up. If you notice how it went down after the Eurobasket game, eventually they asked Giannis about it, but it was Spanoulis that made it into this huge international controversy. So I guess the highlight of the Spanoulis era was getting traded for Luis Scola, which also indirectly led to the infamous Woj on John Hollinger burn for how
Yes.
bad that trade was for the Spurs.
Yeah.
Dave, as a longtime Rockets fan, I'm assuming your favorite Spanoulis memory with the Rockets was that he was traded for Luis Scola, right?
Well, that, and also that he's T-Mac in Greece. I don't know if you remember that, but Jeff Van Gundy saying very clearly, basically airing Spanoulis's laundry to the whole world, saying that he said behind the scenes, well, in Greece, I'm the T-Mac. I'm the guy who gets the ball. And boy, that was humiliating. But yeah, I mean, it didn't quite pan out. He went back and had a very, very successful career in Europe. On Sengun, I got to say, all around his game tonight, very efficient. For me, it's efficiency and defense and 3-point shooting that always concerns me about Sengun. But 10 of 15 from the field tonight, very efficient. Hit his only 3-point attempt, very good sign. 11 boards, 7 assists. Did have 5 turnovers, but you'll put that aside. Just a really good game from him, plus 21. Jabari, we were talking earlier, Ben, like he really wasn't, like he was missing shots. And I'm like, Jabari, you're killing me in this game. You look up, he leads the team in plus minus tonight with plus 25, hits that big 3. He did have one nice drive baseline where he scored, where he went, I believe, around Giannis. I can't remember if I'm remembering correctly. But overall wasn't efficient. Tari has been lights out from 3, crashed back to earth tonight, 0 for 5 from long range. We knew that was going to happen. He's not going to shoot 58% from 3 all season, but it happened really quickly, all in the first half. So just want to give a little bit of mention to those numbers as well. Amen was not impressed in the first half. You already talked about this, Ben, but I was just disappointed with some of the on offense, particularly how he was playing. I think that's going to, iron out some, but it was a little bit of a concerning game from him for me. But just overall, I'm just so impressed with how they came back, because I got to tell you, mentally, third quarter, I'm like, yeah, they're losing this game.
Yeah, and to your point on Jabari, I want to underscore this was at least the 3rd game this season where he's hit a huge 3 down the stretch of this game. And it happened opening night in OKC, and I think the first overtime. It happened late in the Detroit game, which brought him back to within 2 with a couple of minutes left. And obviously it was the go-ahead tonight. And I think that's so important. If you're a role player like Jabari, you can't get scared. If you start off 4 of 14, which I think he was, you've got to have, to go back 20, 30 years, you've got to have that Mario Elie, Robert Horry ability to tune it all out and trust your process. And even if you're not making on a given night, if the ball gets to you and you have a clean look, put it up. And I think that's what Jabari has done this season. I think the last couple of years, he hasn't always done that. He's sort of faded a bit. This year, he hasn't. And his ability to take and make those shots, like obviously he deserves a lot of credit for, he's living up to the Big Shot Bari nickname, but just the willingness to fight through it, to keep playing. I think there's a lot of value in that. Like, Paulo, we're going to do one of our episodes on Rockets Launch Pod this week, doing player grades, in which we'll talk more about some of the role players than we have tonight, going up and down the roster among rotation players. But I just think when you go down the rotation, and you're not talking about the high usage guys, when you're going down to 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, those spots in the rotation, and Jabari's, probably 4th right now, so much of it comes down to your willingness to play through a bad night. And I thought that's what he did tonight. Like, he missed some easy shots. He thinks he should be a lot better, and he probably should be. But, like, there's something to be said, right? That if you're a role player, you've got to trust your process. You can't get phased. He's now in year 4, so he's grown up a lot. Like, you just got to, if you have the right shot the way he did, trust your mechanics, let it fly. And I just think I think that's super valuable for a role player, especially on a Rockets team like this. They've been math disadvantaged a lot this season. Maybe that comes into a little better balance with Reed Sheppard. They can put up more threes, but the Rockets need to take more threes. And if you're a role player like Jabari Smith, Tari Eason, you've got to let it fly, right? Like, even if you're having a bad night, you just got to put it up.
Yeah, and I do think that, at least it strikes me as Jabari's mechanics will go up, more consistent this season than they were last season. Perhaps it's a little bit because the shot doesn't look quite the same as far as, like, it looks more kind of unique than it did before, right? It seems like his elbows is a little bit more far forward, like it's a little bit more gimmicky, or whatever you may call it, from three, not from two, but from three. But he's trusting it, and as you said, he's got to trust it, because if KD and Sengun are scoring inside, and KD can shoot some threes, but he's mostly a mid-range master, right? You gotta, like, that 3-point volume has got to come from those role players, because we don't really have a point guard that's going to pull up from three, right? So if you want to even out the math, that's what you got to do. Last thing I wanted to touch on, and Dave touched on it as well, is thank God the Tari Eason come back to earth game, and probably not the only one, but thank God that game happened in a game that we won. Because if that had happened against the Spurs or against OKC, those games would not have looked the same. There were so far this season a lot of moments where Tari Eason was the one keeping us in games with his flurry of threes. So it's good to get that out of the way in a game that we won. Obviously Tari was never going to be 60%. So you want to take those games where you're not really struggling to shoot, right? And in a weird sense, thank God it happened this game.
Yeah. And to close out, there's a comment in the chat right now I want to address. This game was such a palate cleanser after the Spurs loss, and you finished out the road trip 2-1. You're now 6-3 on the year, so you're consistently taking 2 out of 3. Like, I think this last week, to sort of put a bow on it, has been sort of refreshing in that with all the frustrations, what could have and should have been, you think back to that opening week in OKC and then the home opener against Detroit. Like, you've won two of your last 4 games and 2 of your last 3 wins that were 50-50 games going down the stretch, against Dallas on Monday when they couldn't make a shot, and now today in Milwaukee. It's tough to win 50-50 games, and the Rockets went out down the stretch and made the plays they needed to in both of those games. So 6-3, we know this team is compromised, especially without Dorian Finney-Smith. Like, the one nitpick you could have is, hey, like, they left some meat on the bone early in the year. Well, it feels like they're finally starting to get some of those 50-50 games go their way. And tonight was even lower than 50-50. Obviously, they were down double digits for a decent chunk of this game. But I think just, for all the concerns, can they execute down the stretch? And they should be able to with Kevin Durant and Alperen Sengun. They just didn't the first week of the season. But can they execute down the stretch? Are they going to get some breaks? They got some breaks against Dallas on Monday and now Milwaukee today. And 6-3, it's a fair record. It's probably where they should be. And, now you move forward to a 3-game homestand starting Wednesday night.
Yeah, spreadsheet I have that we talked about before. I have them at 55 wins out of 80 games. There's 2 games we don't know about yet, and they're only 1 game behind that pace. Everything has gone perfectly except the Detroit game, which I had down as a W. But the next few games, I mean, Rockets should get this next one. Wizards, you got the Blazers on Friday. It's going to be big for the Cup. Part of the Cup bracket, and then you've got Paulo and the Magic coming in and Franz on Sunday. But really, just we'll close on this question. I think it's really, really key is, do we see Cam Whitmore tribute video on Wednesday? Like, do we compile the highlights? How does that work exactly? Because there's a lot of points in there.
Well, what's funny is that you actually could have a Cam Whitmore tribute video because there are so many highlights just due to his style of play and the insane dunks and threes. But no, I will say, like, Washington is as must win as it gets. Washington at home, like, you do not want to tune into this post game if the Rockets lose that game. In fact, we probably shouldn't even have a post game if the Rockets somehow lose to the Wizards, because oh my God, I would be inconsolable, Dave. I think you would be too.
Yep, absolutely. Appreciate you guys doing this. This big win for the Rockets. Like I said, it really didn't look good, and for them to come back, it really makes you a lot more optimistic about the season. And hopefully, there are some things they got to clean up: the turnovers and the 3-point defense in the zone. But big plays from the Rockets' key players down the stretch. So give a huge shout out to the Rockets for this one. Appreciate you guys doing this, and thanks everybody